The winter morning bit through Rebecca's worn jacket as she huddled beneath the abandoned railway overpass on the edge of Riverside. Her fingers, chapped and stiff, worked through the tangles in Duke's fur, the only warmth she'd known in months. The German Shepherd mix leaned into her touch, his brown eyes watching her with the kind of loyalty that made her chest ache. She was 17, though most days she felt ancient. 3 years on the streets had carved away the softness of childhood, leaving behind sharp angles and sharper instincts. Duke had found her, or she'd found him, during her first freezing November alone. He'd been dumped outside a gas station, and she'd shared her last granola bar with him. They'd been inseparable ever since. The town of Riverside barely noticed her. To the morning commuters rushing past, she was just another shadow, another problem they could ignore. The local shop owners would shoo her away from their storefronts. The police had warned her twice about loitering. Only old Mrs. Patterson from the church outreach would acknowledge her existence, pressing wrapped sandwiches into her hands every Wednesday. Today felt different, though. Rebecca couldn't explain it, but the air held a strange tension. Duke sensed it too, his ears perked and rotating like satellites. He'd been restless since dawn, whining softly and packing their small camp. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. Across the street, two men in dark suits stood outside the federal building, the tallest structure in their small town. They looked out of place, too polished for Riverside's worn-down charm. One spoke urgently into his phone while the other scanned the street with practiced efficiency. Rebecca pulled her hood lower. Federal agents meant trouble, even if that trouble had nothing to do with her. In her experience, powerful people brought complications, and complications were dangerous when you lived on the margins. But Duke wouldn't stop staring at them, a low growl building in his throat. Something was wrong, very wrong. Agent Michael Torres rubbed his temples, fighting off the headache that had plagued him since arriving in Riverside 3 days ago. His partner, Agent Jennifer Cole, paced beside their vehicle, her jaw tight with frustration. "They're not taking this seriously," she hissed, snapping her phone shut. "DC thinks we're chasing ghosts." Michael knew better. The intercepted communications had been clear. Someone planned to poison Riverside's water treatment facility within 72 hours. A small-town strike meant to test a larger bioweapon before deploying it in major cities. The threat was real, the timeline urgent, but without concrete evidence, their superiors had labeled it a probable hoax. "We have less than 48 hours, Michael said quietly, "if we're right and do nothing." 12,000 people, Mike, 12,000. Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. She'd grown up in a town like this. They'd been stationed outside the federal building, running surveillance on suspected entry points to the facility. The local police chief had laughed them off. The mayor refused to authorize an evacuation without proof of imminent danger. Federal bureaucracy moved slower than molasses, and the clock was ticking. Rebecca watched from her overpass as the two agents argued. She couldn't hear their words, but their body language screamed desperation. Duke pressed against her leg, still growling. Then she saw him. A man in maintenance coveralls emerged from an alley behind the federal building. Nothing unusual except for the way he moved. Too careful, too aware. His eyes swept the area with military precision before he slipped toward a service entrance. Rebecca had spent 3 years learning to read people. Survival demanded it. This man radiated wrong. Duke barked once, sharp and urgent. The agent's head snapped toward the sound, then followed Rebecca's pointing finger. The maintenance man froze, spotting the attention. For one suspended moment, everyone stared at everyone else. Then the man ran. Jennifer and Michael bolted after him, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The man cut through traffic, desperate and fast. Rebecca's heart hammered. She should stay hidden, should stay safe. But Duke was already running. And so was she. Rebecca's legs burned as she sprinted after Duke, who pursued the fleeing man with single-minded determination. The agents were faster, but the suspect knew Riverside's back streets, weaving through alleys and cutting across empty lots that most people forgot existed. But Rebecca had lived in those forgotten spaces. She knew every shortcut, every dead end, every fence with a loose board. "Duke, track," she shouted. The dog veered left down a narrow passage between two abandoned warehouses. Rebecca followed, her worn sneakers slapping against broken pavement. Behind her, she heard the agents pounding footsteps and shouted coordinates into radios. The maintenance man emerged onto Factory Road, glancing back with wild eyes. He didn't see the girl until she stepped directly into his path, arms spread wide. He tried to dodge, but Duke launched himself forward, teeth baring in a warning snarl that froze the man in place. "Don't move," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jennifer and Michael rounded the corner seconds later, weapons trained. "Hands where we can see them, now." The man raised his hand slowly, his face twisting with rage. "You don't know what you've done, girl. You just killed this whole town." Rebecca's blood went cold, but she held her ground until Michael had the man in handcuffs. Jennifer immediately began searching him, pulling out a security badge, legitimate access to the water treatment facility, and a phone filled with encrypted messages. "Good work," Michael said, finally looking at Rebecca properly. His eyes widened, taking in her threadbare clothes and the dog pressed protectively against her side. Thank you, seriously." "Who is he?" Rebecca asked. Jennifer exchanged a glance with her partner. "We can't discuss active investigations, but you may have just saved a lot of lives." The suspect laughed bitterly as they loaded him into their vehicle. "You got one soldier, but the plan's already in motion. You're too late." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "What does he mean?" Michael's face had gone pale. "He's not working alone." The agents couldn't bring Rebecca to the federal building. Protocols and red tape stood in the way. But Jennifer Cole wasn't about to let the only witness who'd actually seen something disappear back into the streets. "We need to debrief you," Jennifer said, guiding Rebecca toward their vehicle. Duke growled suspiciously. "It's okay, we just need to ask some questions." They ended up at a diner 3 blocks away, sliding into a back booth. Michael ordered coffee while Jennifer studied Rebecca with sharp, assessing eyes. "What's your name?" "Rebecca, no last name. She'd stopped using it when her mother's boyfriend kicked her out." "You live around here?" "Around." Rebecca's fingers twisted in Duke's collar beneath the table. These people had power. Power meant danger. But Jennifer's expression softened. "You're not in trouble, I promise. We just need to know, did you see anything else? Anyone meeting with that man? Anything unusual near the water facility?" Rebecca hesitated. Trust wasn't something she could afford. But the suspect's words echoed in her mind. "You're too late." "There's an old maintenance tunnel," she said quietly. "Under 5th Street. The homeless guys used to sleep there before the city sealed it. But about 2 weeks ago I saw men going in and out at night. They had equipment, looked official but wrong somehow. They threatened anyone who came close." Michael leaned forward intently. "Can you show us where?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "It connects to the old sewer system. I heard them talking once about East Access Point. Didn't understand what they meant." Jennifer pulled out a map of Riverside's infrastructure, her finger tracing lines. "The East Access Point connects directly to the primary water intake valve, if they've already positioned something there." "We need to move now," Michael interrupted. "If there's a secondary team." His radio crackled. The detained suspect had stopped talking entirely, lawyering up. No additional information. Rebecca watched their growing desperation. "I can get you inside that tunnel. There's a way in they don't know about, but you'll never find it without me." "Absolutely not," Jennifer said immediately. "You're a civilian, a minor." "I'm 17, and I know those tunnels better than anyone alive." Rebecca's jaw set stubbornly. People listen to you are in danger. Let me help." They shouldn't have brought her. Every regulation, every protocol screamed against it. But Michael and Jennifer were out of time, out of options, and out of backup that would arrive before whatever was planned went into motion. Rebecca led them through a section of Riverside most residents pretended didn't exist, the industrial zone where factories had died decades ago, leaving hollow corpses of buildings. Duke trotted ahead, his senses alert for danger. "There," Rebecca pointed to a collapsed section of chain-link fence, nearly invisible beneath overgrown weeds. "The entrance is through the old boiler room." They squeezed through rusted doors that groaned protests. Inside, darkness swallowed them whole. Jennifer clicked on a flashlight, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and debris scattered across cracked concrete. Rebecca moved confidently through the maze, remembering the winter she and Duke had sheltered here. The tunnel entrance is behind the furnace. They sealed it with concrete, but there's a gap near the bottom, big enough to crawl through. Michael examined the opening, then his radio. No signal down here. They were on their own. "I go first," he said firmly. "Then Jennifer. Rebecca, you stay here with your dog." "No way," Rebecca shot back. "That tunnel splits in 3 directions after 50 yards. You'll get lost, waste time, or walk into a trap. Your choice." Jennifer touched Michael's arm. "She's right, and we're running out of time." They crawled through single file, emerging into a passage that reeked of stagnant water and decay. Rebecca pulled a small flashlight from her pocket, stolen from a hardware store months ago, one of her few possessions. The beam cut through darkness, revealing old pipes and electrical conduits running along the ceiling. "Stay close," she whispered. "Watch for loose grating." They moved deeper, the silence broken only by dripping water and their careful footsteps. Then Rebecca froze, holding up her hand. Ahead, a faint glow flickered. Voices drifted through the tunnel, low, urgent, professional. Michael and Jennifer drew their weapons. Through the darkness, they saw 2 figures hunched over equipment attached to a massive valve system. Digital readouts blinked red. Canisters sat nearby, marked with symbols Rebecca didn't recognize but knew meant death. The timer read 43 minutes. "Federal agents, hands where we can see them." The 2 men at the valve spun around, and everything happened at once. One lunged for a weapon, while the other slammed his fist against a panel. Alarms shrieked through the tunnel, red emergency lights strobing like a heartbeat. Jennifer fired a warning shot that sparked off the metal wall. "Down now." But the first man was already firing back, forcing them behind a concrete support column. Bullets ricocheted wildly in the enclosed space, the sound deafening. Rebecca dropped flat, pulling Duke down with her, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We can't let them leave," Michael shouted over the chaos. "If they trigger that release remotely." The second man was typing frantically on a keyboard, overriding something. The timer jumped, 28 minutes, then 15, then 8. "He's accelerating the release." Jennifer moved from cover, firing precisely. The man at the computer crumpled, but the first gunman tackled Michael and they went down hard, struggling for control of the weapon. Rebecca's mind raced. The computer was still active, the timer ticking down. 7 minutes, 6. Someone had to stop it. She crawled forward on her elbows, Duke pressed against her side. The computer screen glowed with incomprehensible code and schematics. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, shaking. She knew nothing about computers beyond the public library terminals, nothing about chemical weapons or water systems. But she knew enough about the streets to recognize an emergency shutoff when she saw one. A big, red button labeled emergency valve closure sat beside the keyboard, protected by a clear plastic cover. Rebecca flipped the cover up and slammed her palm down. Immediately, massive grinding sounds echoed through the tunnel. The valve system shuddered, metal screeching against metal. The digital readouts flickered, confused, then began displaying new information. The gunman fighting Michael saw what she'd done and roared in fury, breaking away to charge at Rebecca. Duke launched himself at the man's throat, 60 pounds of protective fury. The man went down screaming as Jennifer finally got a clear shot, ending the threat. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and Duke's low growls. Michael staggered to the computer, checking the display. The emergency closure. It stopped the main release, but there's still contamination in the system. We need hazmat and the city engineers here immediately. Within 2 hours, the tunnel became a controlled chaos of hazmat suits, federal agents, and local emergency responders. The mayor who dismissed their warning stood pale-faced as engineers explained how close Riverside had come to catastrophe. 12,000 residents, minutes away from contaminated water entering their homes. Rebecca sat on a curb outside the industrial zone, wrapped in someone's jacket, Duke's head in her lap. She watched the organized pandemonium with numb detachment. Ambulances, news vans, important people making important statements. Jennifer emerged from the crowd, carrying 2 bottles of water and a sandwich. She sat beside Rebecca without asking permission. The lab analysis came back preliminary, Jennifer said quietly. The compound they were planning to release. It's a slow-acting neurotoxin. People wouldn't have shown symptoms for days. By the time anyone realized, it would have been too late. The death toll would have been. She trailed off, unable to finish. Rebecca took a sip of water, her hands still trembling. Why? Testing ground. Riverside is small, isolated, easy to contain data from. They plan to observe the effects, refine the formula, then deploy it in major metropolitan areas. Jennifer's voice hardened. We've been tracking this cell for 8 months. You helped us break them. I just saw something wrong. Most people see wrong things every day and look away. Jennifer studied Rebecca's face. You didn't, you acted. That matters. Michael approached, phone in hand. Rebecca, we need to process you through official channels. Witness statements, protection protocols. Given your, he hesitated, searching for diplomatic words, living situation, we can arrange temporary housing, make sure you're safe. Rebecca's arms tightened around Duke. What does that mean? It means foster care, Jennifer said gently. Just until you turn 18. Standard procedure for minors without guardians. Fear flashed through Rebecca's eyes, the same fear that had kept her running for 3 years. Foster care meant losing Duke, meant locked doors and rules and people who'd look at her like a problem to manage. I can't, she whispered. Duke. We know, Jennifer interrupted, and we're not going to separate you, I promise. But Rebecca had heard promises before. 3 weeks later, Rebecca stood in front of a small house on Maple Street, her few possessions in a donated backpack. Duke pressed against her leg, sensing her anxiety. Jennifer Cole had pulled strings Rebecca didn't fully understand. Instead of the foster system, she'd connected Rebecca with Margaret Chen, a retired social worker who'd been looking for a reason to come out of retirement. Margaret's house had a fenced yard for Duke and a spare bedroom that Margaret kept calling, yours now. It's temporary, Rebecca said for the 100th time, though her voice lacked conviction. It's home, Margaret corrected, appearing in the doorway with a warm smile. For as long as you need it. The news coverage had been intense but brief. Federal agents stopped a bioterror attack, suspects in custody, investigation ongoing. Rebecca's name was never mentioned, her identity protected, but Riverside knew. Small towns always knew. Mrs. Patterson from the church brought casseroles. The hardware store owner offered Rebecca a part-time job. The school principal personally enrolled her, arranging tutoring to help her catch up. People who'd walked past her for 3 years suddenly saw her as human. It felt uncomfortable and overwhelming, and strangely wonderful. Jennifer and Michael visited on a Saturday afternoon bringing news. The investigation closed yesterday. We identified the entire domestic cell, 17 members across 6 states. Your testimony helped build the case. The trial will be straightforward. And Rebecca, Michael added, his expression serious. There's a reward, information leading to the prevention of a terrorist attack. It's substantial, enough for college if you want it. Rebecca's throat tightened. College. The word felt foreign, impossible, like something from another girl's life. You saved thousands of lives, Jennifer said softly, including ours. We wouldn't have found that tunnel in time without you. You deserve to build a future. That evening, Rebecca sat on Margaret's porch with Duke, watching the sunset paint Riverside in gold. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, a shadow people stepped around. But she'd never stopped watching, never stopped caring, never stopped being human. She pulled out the acceptance letter that had arrived that morning. The local community college, offering her a full spot in their spring semester. Margaret had squeezed her shoulder when she read it, eyes bright with pride. Rebecca pressed her face into Duke's fur, letting herself feel something she hadn't allowed in years. Hope. We're going to be okay, she whispered to him. We're going to be more than okay. Duke's tail thumped agreement, and for the first time in forever, Rebecca believed her own words. The girl nobody saw had saved everyone, and in doing so, she'd finally saved herself.